Hey, this is great. I was here yesterday. This is my wife, Jackie, by the way. Married almost 49 years. Now, I know some of you want thanks. Yeah, as we say, 40 of the best years of our life. Just kidding. But I was here yesterday. It was a great group. I hope you can outdo them. They were terrific. We had a lot of fun. I think we learned some things together, and I appreciated it. If somebody said to me, hey, Gary, how'd your talk go? You know what I'd say? You know, I came into the room and the crowd was electric. Sorry. I couldn't wait to say that. It just, you are electric, right? I mean, I'm not crazy. You're not diesel. Okay, good. Hey, thanks for being here. I talked to some of you who came from 2 hours away, and I just want to play a little music for you. Yeah, thanks for coming. I know if you're like us, we just live in Brownsburg. It's a 40-minute drive, but 6,000 cars between, here and there. So sorry about that if you hit that this morning. Well, I looked around the room. It's pretty much true today. Jackie and I are, without question, the oldest people in the room. And that's okay. We love that. You need to be around some older people now and then. That's a little tough for us these days, but you do, because there's a lot of good things that you can learn from someone who's been through a lot of things ahead of you. And I hope we're going to share some with you today that won't be just another talk. There are a lot of talks, and there are good leadership things out there. But I think you're going to find this one something you can literally use maybe before you even go out that door to your lunch or whatever your next thing is. So thanks. Great to be here. Let me tell you, though, a little bit about being old. About in the last 10 years sometime, I think we woke up one day and went, we are old, aren't we? Yeah, you're not there yet. I'm glad, but it's going to happen to you. And one reason I knew I was old was because I started getting replacement parts. Honest truth. Cataract surgeries, so I have new lenses in my eyes, which is a good thing, but that's a little traumatic to go through that. But maybe more traumatic, a little more challenging was right here. I have a new kidney. I had a kidney transplant 2.5 years ago. Again, very thankful for that. I was in, if you know anything about, you follow any of the medical stuff, I was in stage 4, which meant if I graduated to stage 5, I would be on dialysis. And so I had this wonderful lady that was in a church we used to attend. I used to play keys with her husband. He was a bass player. And she heard I needed this donor kidney. And her mom got one, like, I don't know, 20 years before that, saved her mom's life. She said, someday I'm going to give a kidney away if I can. So she goes through the testing and sails through this thing. There's a bunch of tests, several months of time. And sure enough, she said, I passed. And on December 14th of 2022, got this new kidney. But it's a replacement part. That's a little bit scary at times. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these things. This is another thing that made me feel old, because they put these ranges. I didn't put as many. Usually they have about 6 or 8 of them, right? And you're saying, well, which box am I in? Guess what box I'm always in? The last box. Think about that, folks. Think about like a funeral, which is not that. That's the last box. Anyways, you got to laugh sometimes. It's just the way it is. Well, the other thing about being old, that's a good thing, and there are many. Some is perspective about things. But you also have to keep life a little simpler. I wish that weren't always true, but simple isn't always bad either. You got to be a little more careful. I was talking with Ashley, right, about living in Colorado, and I've climbed 9 14,000-foot mountains, and so we talked a little bit about all that. But I don't know if I can do that anymore. You just got to be smart. You think you're still 35, you're not. And some of you are going, yeah, Gary, get real. But that's what I want to do today, not because you can't handle it. You could probably handle a lot more. But I want this talk to be kind of simple, because I want you to remember something. I want you to take something away with you. So we're going to do 4 segments. Start with a funny story. It's really about being old, and I'm not sure it has much to do with the rest of the talk, but maybe some of you had a long drive, or you're tired, or you're down from the week, or you're a little bit discouraged. That's okay. I'll tell you a funny story. I think you're going to like it. Secondly, though, a little more important, will be a fundamental principle. What I've learned about you from Amy and others, by the way, Amy, super job putting all this together. But I said, what are the kind of things that you do? And so I think I'm right from what she said, is that you connect with people. I want to give you a fundamental principle about connecting with people that's revolutionary, simple, yes, but so important to what you do and probably what we do in a lot of our lives. So we'll come to that. But then, beyond that, I want to give you a fresh perspective about that. Here's a way to live that principle. Maybe even more than you already do. Maybe you already are. And so if you say, yeah, I'm doing that, I want you to celebrate, you know? I want you to go, yes, we're on the right track. And then, the last one, it's all free. I'm not here to sell you a program. I'm not trying to get you to sign up for, some special, leadership club or whatever. I got a couple of books, we'll talk about that, but that's really not why I came. If you want one, fine. But it's all free, okay? And you can check, I'll give you my info later. There's some other free stuff if you want to look at that. All right, so let's start here. A funny story. Has to do with that lady. Any idea who she is or was? My mom. My mom. A few years ago before she passed away. She lived to be 94, died just before COVID really got going. Ironically, Jackie's mom lived to be 94, and they died 2 months apart. Isn't that wild? I mean, it was a good thing. We all those years with your moms. But anyways, my mom was kind of quiet. She was an executive secretary for a lot of her life. She would be funny now and then, but the humor would just come out when you least expected it. So the story, I've never forgotten this story. We were at a mall later in her life, maybe late 80s. She, I think, was already in, independent living. But she liked to get out. She still liked to go for a little walk, maybe have a dinner or lunch someplace. And she lived in Florida. My sister lives there. And I would get down there as often as I could. And so when we were down there, we'd take Mom out for someplace to a nice lunch, dinner that she liked, have a short walk, and she always enjoyed that. So we're in Florida, and we do this, and I don't even remember the restaurant per se, but it was near a mall, or we had to go through the mall to get back to the car or something. So we're going through a big department store. I don't remember if it was a Penny's or a Kohl's or something like that. And you know how now in department stores they make you kind of walk. You like to say, could you just put the aisleway directly to the door? But no, you got to go. Obviously, they want you to see other stuff. So we're doing that. Mom's doing fine. She's taking her time. My sister and I think her husband were there, several of us. We come around, we're going through the ladies' department as the last one before we got to the door. And as we turn one of those little corners, there's a mannequin, female mannequin, nothing on. But that happens in stores. They're getting ready for the next display or outfit. My mom, I'm not making this up, she's walking along, she looks at that and she says, I have an outfit just like that at home. And then she says, but it needs to be ironed. Oh gosh, I'm going, Mom, where did that come from? But sometimes we bring humor when we're older too, and that's not a bad thing. Well, we need to move to the more important stuff. A fundamental principle. Who's that? Say it louder. Simon Cowell, yes, some of you know. If you don't know who Simon Cowell is, he's often, what's his role on the TV programs? He's a judge. Yeah, he started on American Idol, and now I don't think he's involved in Idol other than maybe producing it, but now he's on America's Got Talent. What do you always know about Simon Cowell? The people who get into these contests, they're thinking what? What's he like? He's tough, yes, he's critical. He finds the smallest thing. He still does this where he'll say, stop, in the middle of their song, right? And you go, stop, do you have another song? Oh, wow, I'm in trouble. And I guess they're supposed to have a second song. You know what? He's almost always right, but you don't want to cross him. Because see, if you're going to go on in the competition from that point, or if you're going to want to win, you have to hear something from Simon Cowell. I'm convinced of it. I've watched it enough. Here's what it is, and this can apply to what we do. I'm going to remember you. I'm going to remember you. Because you see, there are a lot of great musicians. I'm a musician. There are a lot of great musicians. There are a lot of great, singers. There are a lot of great dancers. I mean, all the different skills. There's a ton of pretty good people. Now, there's a few people, particularly on American Idol, that are terrible and just don't know it. But you're up against usually a lot of talented people. And see, talent alone doesn't do it. What does it? Well, one of the things is they got to remember it. They have to go, yes, I'll never forget that performance. That was so good, because all the rest will just be the same. That's true of what we do. That's true of what we do. If people don't remember what we do in even a one-on-one thing, in a talk, if you all walk out the door a little bit and go, hey, that was a pretty good talk, that was funny, the jokes, I like the jokes, what's for lunch? Okay, good. I'm sorry if you want to have lunch. I would be surprised. But I hope it's not that. I hope you say, I don't remember, what do you even talk about? There's a lot of that out there. And so it's important that people remember even a phone call, even a first connection. You walk in the door someplace. I have a favorite phrase. I don't know if I remember this one. Intention is one thing, perception's everything. Right? I mean, if you're offended by today or something, I don't think you will be, but if you were, and you're kind of ticked off, and you came up and told me that, and I just got defensive and went, I didn't intend that. Come on, what's your problem? No, part of that's my problem, because I have to think about, did I also deal with the perception of what happened? See, if you remember it for a good reason, then that's a good thing. So I'm going to give you 5 things that come really from a book by Chip and Dan, not Chip and Dale, Chip and Dan Heath. These are marketers. They wrote this book, a couple books, to help people to make a difference doing advertising, etc. Made to stick. Made to stick. Why do things stick with people? Why do you remember a Super Bowl commercial, or why do you remember that sign in the store? Why do you remember that person who greeted you? All those kind of things. Why would you remember someone on the phone that you had to deal with? Well, there are 5 things they suggested. They actually did research on this. And the first one was that, what I just talked about at the beginning, they said you got to keep it simple. Now, simple is not simplistic. We're not talking about dumbing everything down, treating these people or whoever like they don't know anything. No, it's when it's simple, you remember it. That's why I gave you that little outline a couple minutes ago. I don't think that was too hard to remember. Simple can be wording. Simple can be instructions. Where you go, you know these instructions a million times, you've done them a million times, and you tell them to the person, goes, oh, that should be easy. Well, was it really simple? Here's what I want you to also do as I go through these 5, is write down, or just think about, what would that look like in what I do, what you do? Do we make it simple? Maybe you already do. Like I said, celebrate that if you do. Go, yes. But maybe here or maybe later in some other discussions or future meetings, you can say, hey, do we do things simply? Do we ever evaluate that? Do we ever ask people, did that make sense? That would be a start. If you do, they'll remember it better. Second one is the unexpected. The unexpected, not the impossible. Don't start promising that kind of thing. But do you do things that are unexpected? I guarantee you will remember them. I'll bet, I won't ask, we'll take the time to do that, but I'll bet there's a bunch of you, maybe most of you, who if I said, tell me about an event that was so unexpected, it was really cool, it was really good, it could be a negative thing, but positive ones are better. that you just say, I'll never forget that. I'll tell you about one. I've been to Eastern Europe, different countries, Russia, Turkey, etc., 20 times, more than 20. One of my early trips there, I was with a Russian-speaking pastor, older man. I was staying in his house, and normally I had a translator. I speak some Russian now, but it was a translator during the day, and the translator had to leave because they had to go home. They had their own family. But I stayed at his house sometimes. He didn't speak any English, and my Russian was pretty limited, but we made do. So one morning we were off somewhere, and the weather was just awful, rain like crazy. And in this little town, they didn't have all paved roads. They had some, but a lot of them were just dirt and mud. So we had to walk somewhere. He didn't even have a car. So we walked to this place. We come back. Our shoes are just covered with mud, but that was okay. I'm a nice man. I can take care of my shoes. So you always take them off. And so we took them off, and we were there, I think, overnight. And the next morning, after we came back from that little hike or wherever we were, I fell asleep because it was fairly early in the trip and I was jet lagged. And I just couldn't stay awake, so I laid down on his couch, and I'm out. But knowing that in a couple hours, someone's going to come and pick me up to take me back into the city. So I fell asleep, I wake up, and I go, oh, yeah, they're going to be here in 20 minutes. I got to go check my shoes. I walk over to his door. They're spotless. This is a man who has almost nothing compared to what we have. And I just remember tears started coming down my cheeks going, and I looked at him and he had this little gleam in his eye, like, not that he was proud, just I was happy to serve you. I will never, ever forget that. You see, that's those unexpected things. So think about, what would the unexpected look like for you in what you do? I don't know. You're the experts at that, so I'm going to let you take care of that. But do we ever do that? I mean, I know unexpected in the business world has been things like just somebody called me. Somebody followed up with me. Somebody listened to me. Somebody responded. I'm going to talk about a couple of areas in that in a minute. But think about, what do you do that's sometimes unexpected? You go, people aren't going to forget that. People aren't going to forget that. All right. Thirdly, clarity, not overthought. Just, it kind of goes with the first one, but is this clear? I mean, it might be simple, but maybe you spell out a 3-letter word. That's your acrostic. But when you look at it, go, does that make any sense? I've listened to talks and things where I go, oh, that was a clever little thing, but I don't have a clue what that means. Yeah, it's got to also be clear. It's got to make sense. Does this fit with the kind of things we talk about? If you're an average person that you talk to, will they just go, oh, yeah, thanks, I get that. You spelled out cat, and it works. Okay, whatever. So just don't overthink it, but be clear. When you talk about the vision of your company or what you do or your office or whatever, it might be, again, a really clever vision. Does it make sense? Do you understand? If that's our vision, that's what we do? Maybe you do. I hope you do. If you do, celebrate it. Okay, that was the third one. The fourth one, the emotional. Now, some of you are thinking, wait a minute, are we going to become therapists here? But I've heard that some of you are really good at responding because people are going through challenges. They're going through tough times. And I just want to encourage you, if you're doing that, to say, way to go, because emotional moments, they matter. They matter to people. I don't know if you saw, this was a commercial some years ago for gum. As it started, there was a dad with his little 5-6-year-old daughter, old enough to chew gum. And he would give her a piece of the gum they were advertising, and then he would take the wrapper off, she'd take the gum, and then he'd take the little piece of paper, and he'd turn it into like a pterodactyl or something. I wish I could do that, but then they showed him the little girl, a little older, maybe grade school, same thing, give her a piece of gum, he makes a little something, hippopotamus. And then they do another, whatever. And the commercial's flowing right along. And then the end of the commercial, the girl is going off to college. And so they're bringing boxes and all the stuff that she would need for her room. They're putting it in the back of the car trunk or whatever. It's pretty full. And the dad has the last load, and he's got some stuff in his arm. And on the top, there's a shoebox, and it's not hooked to anything, and it slides off into the driveway. And guess what's in the shoebox? All those little pieces of paper, all the little animals, kind of representing this is a whole life of dad and daughter, and they did these cool things, and now she's leaving. Oh, I have a daughter. I got thinking about, as I'm watching this commercial, I'm crying. I'm so embarrassed. I'm going, the tears run down. I have a daughter. I'm thinking, what would that be like in the whole thing? And then I'm thinking, Gary, this is a gum commercial, for crying out loud. But they got me. Why? Because of the emotion. And what does that mean for you? Again, you'll have to decide that, but I think it could be something very simple as just like a little phrase. As they tell you about what's going on, tell me more about that. Or, you know, if that were me, I'd be pretty scared right now. I wonder if you are. Not you know that. Again, you're not their therapist. Will they remember that when they talk to you, or this could be in your community, this can happen anywhere. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Will people remember that you stopped long enough to share their emotions? There's a little boy across the street from us. He has this little electric dump truck. And we knew them pretty well, but not great. I wasn't real close to him. So anyways, he drives up my driveway. It's kind of a sloped driveway. And he's in his little truck. I'm working in the garage. And he says, do you have anything I could put in the back of my dump truck? He's like 5 or whatever. And I said, I think so. And I had a pail of, just dirt from digging up plants or, whatever. I said, here's some stuff. And then I'm thinking, his parents are going to think I'm sending them all my junk. I said, if your parents don't want this, bring it back. But so I put some dirt in his dump truck. He goes, oh, thank you. And then he starts driving away. And I went and I said, hey, good to see you, Cash. That's his name. And he turns around, he looks at me and goes, I didn't know you knew my name. Wow. Now, that wasn't that significant for him at that point in time, but that was emotional. Hey, this man, he knows my name? How cool is that? So you can think about what all that looks like. We'll talk a little bit more about that, because there's one more that's related to that. Everybody has a story. We talked about the gum commercial. What did they do? They turned it into a story. Almost every commercial now is some kind of a story, some of the picture. People remember stories. And sometimes you need to tell those. Or sometimes you need to say, really, sounds like you've got quite a story. I'm a pretty good listener. But, maybe that's appropriate, maybe not. But just be open to say, remember Simon Cowell? I will remember you. I will remember this organization. I will remember when I was sitting around that table and somebody said that. I remember that they took time. I remember that they stopped and maybe did any one of these things. Simple, unexpected, clear, emotion, story. Those are 5 ways people will remember you. Well, I said I also give you a fresh perspective. My favorite part of this whole deal, because it's one thing to talk about something, it's another thing to do it. And I want to give you a pretty easy way. It's not the only way. You don't have to use my method or this method, but I think you might find it helpful. So here we go. A fresh perspective. What if what a person remembered you for helped move them forward instead of staying stuck? In other words, it wasn't just, they were nice, but you actually had some kind of interaction with them that says, I want to keep going. I spoke to a group of nurses. Ever since I had this transplant, I just so appreciate people in the medical field. Perfect people? No, there aren't any perfect people. But where I went, IU, I'm not doing a commercial for them, but IU Health, I went there, had the best surgeon in the country. The staff was phenomenal. I've never forgotten that. And so I've tried to say thank you to them. I spoke to this group of nurses, did this talk in its own form, but talked to them, and I asked for some reviews. I just said, look, I just would love to get 2 or 3 of you to tell me what you thought. Well, the gal in charge I happen to know, and she said, I'll get you some reviews. So you got about 8 of them, and several of them said, I was ready to quit. You know, the medical field's pretty hard these days. The educational field is pretty hard these days. There are a lot of people saying, I don't think I'm making a difference. Well, I want to give you something that will say, maybe you already are, or you've got a chance to not just help someone in the moment, but to help them move forward. What if that happened? Or what if what a person remembered gave them hope and encouragement and strength to not give up, but to actually thrive? Maybe they weren't going to quit, but they're just kind of putting their time in. Yeah, okay, I got a job, I get paid, I kind of like it, but again, I don't think I'm growing through this. My days aren't getting necessarily better. We'll talk about that. And then what if what person remembered led them or helped them not only help themselves and thrive and feel better, but all of a sudden they said, that was so good, I'm going to do that for other people. What if that happened? I was in a restaurant, favorite breakfast place we have, and I happened to go in by myself, so I sat at the counter, and there's a young server that I've talked to now and then, but never really had a chance to talk more. So he's sitting right there. I'm by myself. I said, hey, what do you do when you're not here? And he says, well, I work with young kids in like Pee-wee football. He says, I'm one of their coaches. We have a big team of coaches, a lot of kids. And he says, most of them are underprivileged kids. I said, man, way to go. That's awesome. I said, I'll bet some of those kids look to you for things that maybe they don't get at home and that you're really helping them to move forward. He says, I think so. So I gave him my little talk, which you're going to hear more about in a minute. And he said, could I share this with all of my coaches? I said, no, it's copyrighted. No, I didn't. I said, of course you can. That would be great. I'd love it if you... But see, right away, all of a sudden he's thinking, I want to give this to some other people. So how do you do that? You should have a domino on your table. But here's what they're for. It's just an illustration. But it's embracing the power of one connection that can help change a person's life trajectory and ultimately impact many others. I've spoken in front of thousands of people, but I've also spoken for 2 or 3. The number doesn't matter, because here's the deal. Dominoes. You ever look at those things on YouTube, those displays? If you haven't looked at some of those, they're phenomenal. They'll set up thousands of dominoes. I'm convinced these people have way too much time on their hands. But some do it professionally. They'll go into a company meeting. They'll set up 10,000 dominoes in some display somewhere. The company will pay them a bunch of dollars. And then what happens? How do you start one of those domino displays? You all know, right? Touch the first one. Somebody just goes, toot, when it's ready to go. You touch the first domino. And what happens? That domino starts to touch others. If the first is toppled, mostly there'll be people who follow. It works with people. That's my conclusion. The same can be true with people. You think maybe you're not making a difference? I guarantee there's probably someone in your contacts already who's going, I learned from that. I've never forgotten that. It doesn't matter. And I'll tell you a domino on steroids story later. But let me give you a couple examples from my own experience that I hope will encourage you. First of all, there's a man at the airport. When I first came to Indianapolis, we were planning to do some part-time things, including speaking and some other things, but I was going to somewhat retire, and so we had some money to work with, but thought I need a little more. And so, and I was getting a little bored, so I like to drive, and I like to talk to people. So what would be a good job if you're going to drive and talk to people? Yeah, rideshare. I worked for Lyft. Now, I didn't make a lot of money. That got a little discouraging at the beginning, but it was something, and I got to do what I sort of love to do. But I was a little frustrated, and so on a Monday night, I did this very part-time. Didn't normally go out on Monday night, but I said to Jackie, I just need to get out. I'm a little restless. If I get one good ride from the airport, we live fairly close, that would be fun. So I went about 10 o'clock, because a lot of flights, as many of you know, come in and out of the airport from 10 to 1 in the morning. So I went out there. Pretty soon I get a little beep on my phone, which tells you there's somebody waiting. I drive into the spot. Maybe you've seen it there downstairs. And the guy walks across, we've already connected. He walks right over to my car. This is just before COVID, puts his stuff in the back seat and sits in the front. Now, normally people didn't do that anyways. You, of course, couldn't do it during COVID, but it was fine with me. He didn't look like a serial killer. I thought, well, okay, it should be okay. He hops in the front. Clearly, he's a business guy. So I have a question. I asked two things. Are you coming home? Is this home for you, or are you here on business? I said, either way, I'm awake, and if you're tired, sleep, I will get you there, and no problem. And he said he wanted to talk. And the first thing really he said was, I'm going home because my wife's dying of terminal cancer. Now, he didn't know anything about my background or anything like that. I mean, I have a counseling background, other things. Didn't tell him. I'm just his Lyft driver. But he just had to talk about that. And I said, well, I'm a pretty good listener. I even pray for people, but I'm a pretty good listener, man. I've got 40 minutes. Talk all you want. And he did. And he just started going through the challenges and how they tried so hard to save her life. What he eventually found out, but didn't know at the beginning, was the lady sitting right over there, 15 years before that, had colon rectal cancer, stage 3. We didn't know she was going to live. We're thankful she did. And I didn't go there other than to say, I just got a couple ideas we learned going through her time. Maybe they'll be helpful. He said, tell me. So I shared a couple of those with him very briefly. I have these little wristbands that say, never quit climbing. The view from the top is worth it. I said, this isn't anything magic, but I just want to encourage you. You sounds like you're doing all the right things. I mean, through tears and all that stuff, we get to his house over in Fishers, Lawrence, somewhere, and he says to me, you don't know how badly I needed to be in your car tonight. I didn't make that happen. I just was going out on Monday night to get a ride. And I said, well, I don't know if I did that much. She says, oh no, thank you, thank you, thank you. I've never seen him again. I don't know if I ever will. And this is true for you. Sometimes you'll do something good. You'll be like, I think that was a first domino moment, but you don't know the outcomes. But I know enough outcomes to know that somehow that had to be helpful. Maybe with one other person, maybe with his family, I don't know. But I'll never forget the man at the airport. I'll never forget a server at a restaurant. It was just after COVID. A young gal, I think she was 19 or 20, and when I went to restaurants after that, I would always say, because servers, I know, lost their job, they didn't work. And I just said, what did you do during COVID? How'd that work for you? And she said, well, I was doing pretty good. I'd saved some money to get my own apartment. She said, but I had to spend my extra money to just get by. And she said, now I'm working again. I've got 2 or 3 jobs. I can't remember what she said. And I said, well, way to go. I said, a lot of people would just expect other people to fix this. Thank you for hanging in there. You're working really hard. Keep it up. And this is kind of in the middle of our breakfast. So we're finished our breakfast and drinking some coffee, and she comes over and brings the bill. Well, one thing we do, it's just our little thing, a couple times a year, we'll pull together $300-400 in $100 bills or 50s or something like that, and just keep in a wallet and go, I wonder if this could help somebody. So we heard her story, and we looked at each other while she was gone and said, this would be cool to help her. So she comes back, and I guess she brought the check back, or it was still on the table, and I said, do you get to keep all your tips? And she says, yeah, I do. I said, well, good. I said, I'm not going to put a tip on today. I like to mess with them a little bit. Wanted to be a surprise. She says, oh, okay. Like, this guy's cheap. I hate you. I don't know what she thought. I said, no, I'm going to give you a tip, but I don't want to put it on there. I pull out a $100 bill, not because I'm rich, just because that's what we like to do now and then. Happen to have it. Handed it to her. I said, here, this will not fix your problem, but I want to encourage you, don't quit. You are doing the right things. So I could see a few tears coming in her eyes, but she hustled away. That was fine. She didn't have to say anything more. We were good. If she never came back, it was one of those where you pay up in the front. Anyways. But about 10, 12 minutes later, we're still drinking some coffee, taking our time. Glad we did. She comes back. Comes up to the end of the table and she goes, I can talk now. I thought, well, good. I didn't know quite where that was going. She says, oh, I've been in the back room crying for the last 15 minutes. I said, well, we didn't try to make you cry. She said, oh, I know. She said, but thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm convinced that was a first domino moment. Sometimes you do get to see people again. And I'm going to tell you one more. This is the domino on steroids. This may or may not ever happen to you, but I want you to see the potential of it. A little girl in a classroom. A little girl in a classroom. Before Jackie and I even met, she was a teacher, elementary school teacher, and was teaching third grade. And she got a little Korean girl. There she is. I'll call her Mary Kay, because that's her name. She's in her classroom, third grade. She's only there for one semester because her father was a leader in South Korea, still is, still living actually. And he would come to the States periodically and raise money and, do some speaking. So she's in this classroom, and unfortunately the leadership of the school, the great leaders, but they missed something. They didn't tell Jackie that while she could speak pretty good English, she couldn't read or write it. So Jackie, as naturally, did this fun thing where she said, well, let's just read a little story. You're all good readers. It was like first or second grade stuff, nothing that anybody would be overwhelmed with. She says, let's all read a sentence or two. So they're going around the room. Well, guess what happens when they get to Mary Kay? She's stumbling over first, second grade words. And of course, kids are always wonderful, aren't they? Yeah, the boys. Are you stupid or whatever? You can't read this baby stuff? Where are you from? Whatever they said. So Jackie decides that she's going to ask her, why don't you go to the board and write words in Korean? Now, if you've seen Korean letters, they're really cool. They're intricate and all different kind of cool shapes and that kind of thing. So she goes, I can do that. She goes on the board, starts writing some words. So the kids start asking her, even the boys who were criticizing, can you write my dog's name? Can you write my last name? Can you write? And she's doing this. She went from a fallen hero kind of person to a superhero in about 30 minutes. That's not the rest of the story. So she leaves after that semester, goes wherever. Jackie loses touch with her. We're married, and as we're thinking about it, she told me that story, has no idea where she is. But she runs into her dad at a conference somewhere, and he's speaking, and so she thought, maybe I'll go talk to Dad. Maybe he remembers me. It was 40 years before. So she goes up to this dad, and she says, I don't know if you remember me. I was Miss Sanders, and I'm Miss Sinclair, and I taught your daughter in second grade. And he goes, oh, I remember. And so he has some assistant there. He says, give me my phone. Right then, he says, he calls and starts talking in Korean. She's not there. The daughter's not there. But he leaves a message. And she says, oh, she's going to call you back tonight. Dad is still dad. And she did. She called Jackie back, and they talked for the first time in 40-some years. Found out that little girl that was in her third grade class went to this school in the Northeast. Maybe you've heard of it, Harvard. Yeah, she went to Harvard, PhD in International Education Studies. And for 40-some years has taught other students what she learned, and she said, the core of what my whole philosophy is about in education came out of your class. 2 years ago, we sat in a restaurant with her And she told us the rest of the story in Southern California. We've had 2 meetings now. I'll tell you, that's life for me. That's worth it. I don't care if you don't have any others. I've told that story to educators, and they go, I've never thought about that potential. All I think about is that kid who couldn't do this, or that squirrely one who drove us crazy, or whatever. And so often they're now and then I want to find out more. Or yes, one came back and I never thought of how significant that was. I never thought about the possibility, the possibility that you could meet her 40 years later and hear the rest of the story. You won't always hear the rest of the story, but we got blessed to do that. That's little Mary Kay. And she's still impacting people. She's still impacting people. I gave her some ideas, some things that maybe we could help with. And she says, my mind is already going. I mean, I don't know where she'll stop, but it's unbelievable. Will they all be like that? No. Doesn't matter. They don't have to all be like that. But if you're ever feeling down, like, I wonder if that call was any good today, I hope you'll go, yeah. Or it doesn't have to be at work. I went to a school board meeting. As I said, my heart beats for educators and people who work with kids and maybe never see the results. So I went to a school board meeting. I had no idea how to get into the school. You know, I knew a few people, but I said, I'm just going to go to a school board meeting. So I went to 2 meetings because I didn't know the process. The second meeting, I go in and they fill out a little form that says, here's my name and what I want to talk about. And so I go to this meeting, and it was a little scary because when the meeting started, or before it started, all these parents are coming in, all these students are coming into the meeting. And it was right during that time when, you know, in Indiana, they're facing money problems and education, and who's going to provide the money, and there's a lot of controversy going on. I'm going, oh gosh, why did I come to this meeting? This is going to be a nightmare. They're going to be fighting, they're going to be arguing, who knows? Well, it turned out they were giving out awards that night. It wasn't what I thought. And so they did this really nice thing. Kids got awards and they built them up, and it was really good. But then they all leave because, you know, there's a meeting to follow. Well, about 20 people stayed around, and I thought, well, there'll be other people like me want to say something. And the chairman of the meeting says, well, we just have one tonight. Well, what are these other people here for? Mr. Sinclair. And so I come up and I give my little brief talk, and I end with the Mary Kay story. And half of the board's crying. Not that wasn't my goal, but I knew their hearts were touched. I knew there was emotion. I knew they got the story part. I knew they were going to remember that. And so I gave them all a domino, did, you know, the usual things you might expect. And every one of before the meeting was over, they had a little time where they could say something. Every one of them said, that was unbelievable. Not me, and I don't care. Just that hit them, that, wow, we're making a difference. And I said, I want you to tell that to your team, because there's people ready to check out, probably. So after the meeting, the chairman of the board walks over to me and said, you know, I do all the orientation for our teachers. Can I use your idea and, you know, give out dominoes? And I did my little joke again. No, it's copyrighted, it's mine, you can't have it. No, I said, absolutely. Because why? Because like that little girl, like that story now is, we send her notes every now and then and say, hey, I got to tell your story again, and you don't know what a difference that made. Thank you for being willing to share it with us. So a couple so now what's. Think and maybe talk about how you can provide connections people remember. Or as I've already said, if you're already doing it, celebrate it. Remind each other, yeah, this works, this is important. Here's what we do. Or maybe we could do better. Or maybe we could just think about that. Or maybe I can think about it. And it doesn't have to be at work. Again, it could be at home. It could be wherever. Restaurants, like we did. Or anticipate first domino moments in both your work and personal life. On the way here. Not just when I speak. When I go to have breakfast, I just go, it would be cool to have another first domino moment. I don't make it happen. If it doesn't happen, it's cool. It's okay. But I anticipate those. I think about that now, not in some crazy nut way, just I look forward to it. Enjoy and talk about the moments when you sensed you made a difference. People remembered their encounter with you and desired more. I would guess, I don't know how much contact you have with each other, but maybe it's other people where you work, just to say, hey, I mean, I come home all the time and I say, I had this domino moment today. It's helped our house. The staff that I work with in other settings, they know, are you going to tell another domino story? Sometimes I have to back off because there's just too many. It doesn't matter. But what if you did that? Could it change attitudes and tones on your team? Maybe. What about just having more moments where you go, yeah, it was a hard day, but I still had some joy in it, Or more stories and company gains. I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But I want to camp on this last one, and I'm done. Any of you ever watched the TV show The Resident? It was a doctor drama, and there was a resident who became the chief resident, and then he got married to one of the nurses, and so they're working in the same hospital. We watched every episode. If you need surgery, I think I can do it. I mean, I've watched it so many times. Not really. But I'll never forget, here we go, remember, one episode. Because it had all the elements, I think, of those 5 in it. I'm going to leave you with this. In the episode, they had just come out of COVID. So all the nurses and doctors are exhausted, and that was true, really happened a lot. And so they were finally going to get a 4-day weekend. And so this husband and his nurse wife were so excited they were going to Cabo or something. And except the only problem was Thursday night of the weekend, there was an earthquake in the city. That's the story, obviously written. So what happened? All the staff that were going to take their vacations and finally get a break got to come back into the hospital. Everybody's busy. And so they go. I think it was a couple different nights, the whole weekend pretty much. They worked, everybody worked hard. And they obviously missed their trip. So they're sitting, I think it's Sunday, they finally get done, they finally get back home, and they're having a glass of wine or something, just trying to process what happened. And I love this line. The wife, the nurse, says to her husband, honey, I know this wasn't the kind of weekend we hoped for, but it's the kind of weekend we live for. Whew. Oh, are you kidding me? Wouldn't it be great, even in our tough times, if we can say, yeah, no job's perfect, no situations, no community, no whatever, group is perfect. But you know what? Today, it maybe didn't even go as planned, but it's still what I live for. That's because it's not just this. It's I get to touch people's lives. I get to topple a domino. And maybe it will go on and on and on and on, and that's worth it. See, that makes life a little more worth living for, isn't it? It makes those days when you go, I don't think I'm doing anything. Oh, look at those people. No, don't go there. You have a chance to topple a first domino and literally change the world. You're part of the world anyways. And you may know it, all the answers, you may not. Don't worry about that. Just, as Nike says,